Police of Reddit, what is the absolute worst crime scene you've come across? I have two, but both not crime scenes. First, decapitated body in a one vehicle RTC in Concert Co, Durham, England. Crashed into a stone wall and overturned, somehow decapitating the driver. Second was a sudden death. In a flat, the occupants in the downstairs flat complained of a leaking drain from upstairs. It turned out the person upstairs had died, rolled out of bed, and was decomposing on the floor. The leak was the various body fluids from the deceased. It wasn't all I ever saw, but certainly the worst. My career was effectively ended by a lady that got hit by a car. It basically ripped her whole face off, except her eyes, basically from the nose down. You could see her vocal cords. She was convulsing on the ground, and a crowd of people were standing around her. I was first there, and she was still alive. There was absolutely nothing I could do for her at that point. It was obvious she was bleeding out. I got down on the pavement, cradled her in my arms and told her she would be okay. While I tried to stop some of the bleeding, I knew I was lying, but I wanted her to not feel alone and scared when she died. She passed in my arms. As the medics showed up, they worked on her for a bit, but they called it before the chopper landed. 2 weeks later I quit. I've had severe PTSD since then. I drink a lot to self-medicate. I go to therapy. I've lost almost all of my friends and several jobs. I take pills every day for depression. Sorry for the vivid description, but you asked. I can still smell it, see it, the works. What a brave, gentle, loving gesture. Thank you for sharing this story. My friend passed away in a car accident, alone and in a foreign country. It eases my pain to think someone might have been there for them like you did to that woman. More love and strength to you. Private security here. Was patrolling the exterior of my building when I smelled it. Once you smell death, you never forget it. What's worse, it was coming from the trash compactor. We have a couple nice restaurants who toss their garbage into the compactor, and a lot of homeless nearby. One of them saw the cooks tossing the garbage the night before and climbed in to grab it. However, the compactor is one of those that will activate when the door closes. Either he didn't know that, or the wind got the door. Holy crap, the thought of being in that situation. Seeing the compactor come down knowing you're about to be crushed. Not a cop, EMT, had a call for pedestrian hit by car on rural road. We haul butt over there and find a 12-year-old female in the road with her dad standing over her. She was riding her bicycle in her driveway with her whole family out in the lawn, rode into the road and was immediately hit by an older man driving a large old Cadillac. The car was driving at 55-60 miles per hour and because of the bicycle this girl hits the windshield, but her head hits the passenger side column. The girl doesn't die on impact and is instead bleeding out through the large piece of her skull that has been half caved in. The girl can't talk but she's blinking and making sounds. Her dad, who had been drinking for the better part of the day, sees the whole thing. He immediately runs out into the road and starts doing the only thing he's ever seen from TV, CPR. Thanks to his woefully drunk version of CPR, he not only crushes her ribs and lungs, but effectively helps her bleed out faster. To make things worse, I have a brand new paramedic with me, who has never seen anything like this. Almost as soon as we arrive, this girl has no pulse and blood is everywhere. A volunteer firefighter showed up on scene and is trying to pull the dad off the girl. Dad and the firefighter get in a full-on fight. We get there, assess her and try to control the bleeding but she's gone. No pulse, massive trauma, no lung sounds, head caved in, laying in a pool of blood bigger than she is. Her whole body is just broken. Another EMS unit shows up and it takes me and the other crew to pull my partner away from the girl, who is grey. As soon as we pull him away, the father begins screaming about losing his little girl and runs into his house. The older man in the caddy, realizing she's dead, begins yelling, "Oh my god, I've killed a little girl." Then things get worse. The old man in the caddy, who hit her, falls down on the pavement and has a massive heart attack. He dies an hour later. Meanwhile, dad is inside the house drinking some kind of whiskey as fast as he can before coming back out bottle in hand, completely out of his mind, and attacking things in his yard. The girl isn't an only child. She's the second youngest of 6, and all of them were outside watching this go down. Other units arrive on scene, We end up transporting dad, the driver of the caddy, and the volunteer firefighter. Injuries sustained from holding back dad. I go out of my way to avoid that stretch of road. My partner quit a week later. Been to a few calls of dead bodies turning up at the water treatment facility. You think normal dead body smell is bad? Try a guy who has spent a week soaking in wastewater dumped out onto a conveyor belt. Also went to a call of a guy, a vet with PTSD, who shot himself in the head in front of his wife when she demanded he go to a wedding. The rest of the family was in the other room. And by rest I mean about 15 other people. Apparently the last thing the wife said was, "We're going to the wedding, pack your bags," and threw a suitcase at him. Well, his Glock was in it and he simply pulled it out and shot himself right in the temple. Dude really didn't like weddings, I guess. Just remembered a guy who got run over by a FedEx truck was basically degloved from the waist down. His right foot was by his right ear and his leg was straight. Also his disc was by his face. Another guy on PCP got into a wreck. Had an almost completely amputated right foot, shattered right femur and a broken left ankle. Took 5 of us to drag him to the ground and hold him till paramedics could hit him with a sedative. He actually was able to take about 5 or 6 steps before we got him on the ground. I rode in the ambulance with him. The medic kept picking his foot that was attached only by skin and letting it drop. One time he said OW. Just kept thinking, "Now, mother sucker, your foot is off. You have no clue how much you just fricked up your life." My dad is currently sitting right by me. He has 20 years active patrol duty and then 7 as sheriff. Well, one time we got a call from guy saying his girlfriend broke his dong. Obviously, we were skeptical, so we go along with ambulance and fire to their house and walk into his girlfriend sobbing and shaking in the corner. We walk into the bedroom and let me tell you, dongs might not be able to break, but this was a very broken dong. Turns out they had gotten drunk and she wanted to hop on his dong by jumping from the top of their headboard onto him. Yep, didn't work. She bent his dong in half. By the time we got there it had turned black and people and the bottom part was swelled but the top part was just flopping. I felt bad for that guy. The other one was a call we got from this woman saying Mrs. Ziz is 90 years old and we haven't seen her in 7 weeks. Can you pre-form a wellness check? This was in the middle of August after a couple streaks of 100-degree weather. 7 weeks is a long time. So me and Rich, his partner, go over and lo and behold no visible AC unit in this 100-year-old house. So we load up our noses with Vicks and open the door. Yep, the Vicks didn't help. That house was well over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This lady had basically melted into a sludgy mess with some human feature still visible on her couch. The vapor her body was giving off was on the windows like condensation. Rich and I both threw up and called the coroner, who basically had to remove this lady with her couch cushions. It was bad. My dad was a cop and the worst case he ever had was while he was a detective. They caught a local teacher with something 8 full CDS of CP. The most awful thing about it that you have to go through it all to see if you can identify any adults in the pictures to try and get them busted. Freaking sick. And if a child is identified, the parents and child have to go through every photo and confirm it. It's horrible. Shameless plugs. Since this place is a freaking graveyard on the front page, here's an older one submitted last month, courtesy of Ukandla Krisha, an officer who volunteers at my work from time to time told me that his worst experience was during his first year on the job. Apparently there was a car accident where the driver was wedged halfway out of the overturned car. Unfortunately, since the car was on fire, they couldn't help the man out and had to stand there and watch him burn to death while he screamed for them to help him. And another, thanks you corpse husband pastor and you/17 herp derp. A call goes out for reported screaming at mid-January. Important later, my father and another office respond to find a known deranged individual, very long rap sheet and has been in and out of psychiatric care for years, sitting on the front porch holding a double-sided wood-splitting axe. Steam is coming up off the grass and there are chunks lying all over the lawn. Upon interviewing the suspect, he admits that he and a friend were playing poker. The suspect was losing nearly every hand and came to the conclusion that his friend was a H8 Southern for ghost and was cheating him. The suspect grabbed the axe and chased his friend outside and hacked him into dozens of pieces, thus causing the warm blood to create steam on the grass. My dad tells the suspect that he needs to get in the police car because it's ain't proof. He said the suspect dropped the axe and sprinted to get in the back seat while thanking them for helping him. TLDR. My father convinced an axe murderer to get in his cop car because it's ghost proof. He thought his friend was a ghost, but ain't. My friend and his dad are volunteer firefighters. I was staying the night and they got a call at 1 AM. They knew it would be a long call based off of info from their radios, so I went with them. According to a witness, a motorcyclist going about 120 miles per hour was going around a wet corner at midnight past a semi-truck. He leaned too much into the corner, slid across the road, still on his bike, hit a tree. He disengaged from his bike when he hit the tree and skidded in front of the semi, where the semi smeared him like spreading peanut butter on toast. I stayed in the truck with the windows down, but could see everything due to all the flashing lights. Semi driver was a wreck, crying and sobbing, saying that it happened so fast that he couldn't do anything. I got to watch my friend and his dad scrape a guy off the road. Drive safe, guys, especially motorcyclists. A friend of mine's dad is a cop. He told the story of one time he was called to investigate a fire that was lit in an alleyway. This was midday. He'd yet to eat lunch and had skipped breakfast, and upon arriving to the scene noticed a particularly appetizing aroma coming from the fire. His mouth was involuntarily watering. Turns out, the fire was an ignited carpet, rolled up, with a dead person inside of it. Saw a little kid standing on a busy street corner, in the dead of winter, around 2 or 3 years old. Went up to him to talk to him and found out he had been standing out there for an hour or so while a good Samaritan kept eyes on him from across the street in his nice and warm house. Eventually led the investigation back to a battered woman's shelter nearby. The manager recognized the kid and said his mom was upstairs in another room. Went up there and found out she died from a H overdose a few days prior. Broke my heart to think that kid had been in that room with his dead mother for days with little food or water, probably crying that his mother wouldn't wake up or talk to him. Dunno whatever happened to him after that. Lost kids are common in my city, but this one wasn't just the forgetful tourist who didn't keep track of their kid while they snapped photographs everywhere. Was intense for a while, as we pulled resources from neighboring counties to put out the alerts for a priority lost child. Dealing with all the stress from various different calls is different depending on the officer. Some of us drink, some of us medicate, some of us counsel. I've learned to carefully bury it away and keep myself busy. I run when I'm feeling depressed and hang out with family when I can't run anymore. Video games help as well. Never had to medicate, but have sought counsel on more than a few occasions. I was a very heavy drinker for years, but was able to quit when my kids were born. Every so often, I get night terrors. Day terrors to us vampires that work midnights, and I can't sleep for more than a few hours a day. I exist on roughly 10-20 hours a week sometimes. It's not an ideal situation to be in, so I recommend if you're dealing with something like PTSD, you should seek help. For me, I hold my children close and cry when no one is around. Then I put on my game face and hit the streets. See, no one explains how stuff like this can affect you when you let it into your life. No one warned me, and freaking heck, yay, holding my babies is the only thing that really helps. Journalist, not police, but I was often at the same sorts of scenes. 1. Partial decapitation in a car accident. A drunk kid hit a small car at high speed, tore the top completely off. Driver's body was still heaving and convulsing in the front seat. Brains and tongue splattered over groceries in the back seat. 2. Hugely obese drug dealer goes into his attic to retrieve his stash. This is in Georgia in the summer. Collapses from the heat and dies. Takes neighbors a few days to notice the smell. Takes a few more before they figure out where exactly it's coming from. The police had to cut a hole in the roof of the house to pull his bloated corpse out. He fell apart into goo as they were doing it. The smell was insane even a quarter mile down the road, once the roof was opened up. 3. Woman who had been killed by a serial killer. Unofficially, the cops on the scene said they had seen this sort of thing a number of times, so they thought it was a serial killing. Was never proven. She was a prostitute and he had beaten her to death and then tightly packed all of her orifices with dirt before dumping her. 4. Train vs car. A mom tried to beat a train with her kids in the car. Train was too fast. When I got to the scene there was a child's head just sitting on the ground. Completely normal except for the fact that his was detached and the body was nowhere in sight. People who try to beat trains are idiots. I'm no cop, but my stepfather wanted me to tell his story. Here goes. My father got a call about a car crash. Usually they're pretty bad, but this one was the worst he'd ever seen. The car had 2 parents and 4 kids inside. The parents were pulled out immediately, and neither had serious injuries. They were both understandably scared about their children, so he put on some rubber gloves and went into the flipped car. All of them were dead, and none were clean deaths. The youngest's spine was protruding from his back, and the oldest was missing most of his head. Another had his face mangled by debris, and the last one was cut in the abdomen by his chest belt, and there were a fair amount of organs hanging out. He had no clue what to do. He didn't want those parents to see that, so he wrapped them up inside of the car. When the mother saw the smallest one come out in a bloodied blanket, she fell to the ground and just screamed. The father walked up to grab the child, and my stepfather just said, "Sir, I don't think you want to see this." And the father just started to wail unlike anything my stepdad had ever heard. "I'm so sorry," he choked out, and after they'd taken the bodies, he was there to clean up and investigate. While he was searching, he found a small, bloody sock sitting on the ground. He told me it was the only time he'd ever cried on the job. In his words, "I've seen grown men blow their brains out. I've seen people beat their spouse until their face was mush. Heck, I even had to reach into someone's chest cavity once to resuscitate them. But I'll never forget those kids. God bless your daddy. I hope he finds peace." I'm not a cop, but a good friend of mine is, and he recently told me a story. A few weeks ago he got a call to a homicide. A 25-year-old male had killed a 63-year-old male. The victim was a father to a 17-year-old high school girl. The girl had recently began dating a known thug drug dealer. The girl's parents had tried to tell her she couldn't date him, but she did it anyways as an act of rebellion. Long story short, the guy stabbed the father about 30 times with a chef's knife found in the owner's kitchen after an argument ensued. The argument was over him not dating his daughter. Looks like dad was right. When my buddy, the cop, showed up he said the whole kitchen was literally covered in the man's blood. He said the corpse looked like a sliced cow carcass. Both the girl and her mother were sitting in their dead husband's blood crying hysterically. And this, kids, is why you listen to your parents. Cop here. Not the worst crime scene but an interesting one. I was dispatched to a call where the wife found her husband unresponsive in his office. I show up, the room is dark, and I find the man in his chair in front of his computer screen. The screen is off but I can hear that the fan on the PC is still running. Anyhow, the guy is elderly and is obviously dead. His right hand is seized up into a jacking off position and his fly is down with the Vienna sausage limp and exposed. Obviously this dude had a medical episode while whacking the weasel. At this point the wife is completely unaware of the circumstances surrounding her husband's death due to the room being dark, his close proximity to the desk, and her reluctance to approach the body. Some time passes, the ME shows up with body removal, and the guy is wheeled away. As I am wrapping up the scene and the wife is in another room with family, my curiosity gets the better of me. I know for a fact that at his age the guy needed some visual stimulus at a minimum to prime the pump. Remembering that the computer was on, but the screen had shut off, I reached for the mouse. When I moved the mouse, the screen turned on to holy dear god of all that is horrible on the internet. Let's get one thing straight. As a male, I have seen my fair share of what is out there in the naked world, but what popped up on that screen was about 20 open tabs of the darkest parts of the web has to offer. What struck me most was the amount of painful looking gay torture this guy had open. Not going to lie, at this point I felt like a teen again, afraid my mom was going to walk in at any moment. I was at a crossroad. Do I break the news to his grieving wife and family a couple rooms over? Heck no. I closed all those tabs and hoped this guy was browsing on private. To dead guy, I hope that I was a bro for you even though I didn't know you. And if anyone ever finds me in that same situation, please do the same for me. RIP dead guy. I wasn't on the call itself but was relieving units who needed a break. They were dispatched to a home after the father came home to a grisly scene. Apparently him and his wife were having marital problems. They had 3 kids. Not sure what the issue was, but the next day after a huge argument the husband went to work. While at work the wife said, "I'll show him." She took his loaded shotgun and while the kids were napping shot them one by one. First the toddler, then the middle child. The oldest woke up. She consoled him until he fell back asleep and then shot him as well. Then she left a heartfelt note about how it was all his fault that she did this. She then blew her head off in the foyer for him to find when he got home. He came home to losing his entire life. That one was one of the most disturbing and vile things I've ever experienced. I've grown to feel numb to almost anything due to this job, but that one still makes me sad. I'm not sure what happened afterwards, but I believe he killed himself months later. We can blame him. My stepfather worked traffic homicide for years and encountered any number of frankly gruesome things, but the story I remember really sticking out in my mind involved a car hitting an electric pole on a rainy night. The car's occupant had, in the course of the accident, become decapitated, had sheared completely off. The electric pole was severely damaged, one of the lines breaking and falling down to rest in a puddle, which now also contained the severed head. The electrical charge was, apparently, causing the head to bounce and sizzle in a very disconcerting fashion, to put it lightly. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.